Welcome to the TAF HUB. This is a brand new show brought to you by TAF Africa Global to educate you on real estate business and all the information you need to know about real estate.
After 45 years of construction and real estate development in 8 African countries, it is time to share my experience, and it can only be done in the TAF HUB. We will be inviting experts who will give you facts and the right regulations on real estate development.
Join us every week on our social media platforms for an exciting show. You can also watch us on JRTS TV every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
Hi viewers, welcome again to another TAF HUB. Today we have somebody, a gentleman who is Gambian.
Gambian.
He's Gambian.
I have a Gambian passport.
He's got a Gambian passport, and he's a nephew to us because of our Gambian structure. But completely different. This time, nothing to do with entrepreneurship or to do with business or real estate. But he's brought in because he's young, and in his own area, he's doing extremely well at the global level. So we're bringing him in so that he can be an inspiration to the young ones. We would like to listen to his story. So, are you an Alhaji?
Not yet. I haven't been on Hajj. I've been on Umrah many times, but not Hajj.
So, Mustafa Briggs, welcome to the TAF HUB.
Thank you so much.
So, please introduce yourself to our audience and tell them briefly, tell us what you do and who you are. Feel free. I want to go back to the very origin.
The very origin?
Yes. Okay. So feel free, it's your day.
Okay, definitely. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya'i wal-mursaleen. Alhamdulillah. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Uncle Taf, I like to call you Uncle Taf. I always call you Uncle Taf.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, my name is Mustafa Briggs, Mustafa Okon Briggs. My father is Nigerian, but my mother is Gambian. And I was raised by my mother's mother, who's Gambian. So I consider myself a Gambian. I have a Gambian passport. We have a house here that you built.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fajara.
In Fajara, yeah, before TAF Global.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely Gambian, alhamdulillah, and I'm proud to be Gambian. I've come here on this visit actually to present my book to the president. Yesterday we had a meeting with His Excellency Adam Abaro to talk to him about what we're doing internationally. And yeah, alhamdulillah, it's a pleasure to always be back home. So you said you wanted to go to the origin.
Yes, yes.
So the origin.
I would like to know you were born to parents, and starting from there.
Definitely. So with our family, I come from a family in Banjul called the Roberts family. We're Creoles and we're Wolof.
Yeah.
So the Roberts family, my grandma always used to tell me, we're the descendants of Jojo Jau.
Yeah.
So Jojo Jau was Senegalese. She was a trader, and she came from Saint Louis. And she was part of a big family there. It was the Jau family, who are the Jogomais or the Jodins of that area. So the Jogomai is the person that selects who the king is going to be. So the 2 royal families in that area, Walo, the Mboj and Jau. So she belonged to the royal family. She is descended from a king called Jogomai Major Khor.
Wow.
Jogomai Major Khor, he had 2 sisters, Khadija and Daro.
Yeah.
That's why the girls, when they praise them, they say, Jaw Fara Major Khor, Fara Jaw Major Khor, Lati Jaw Major Khor. Major Khor, Maram Cham Jaw Yasin Pate, Chamingal Khadija ak Daro, ku ci nek journa bour.
So Bana, take from the Marian Briggs and the Roberts and
so Jojo Jaw migrated to the Gambia with her younger brother.
Yeah.
Her younger brother is the ancestor of Charles Jaw.
Wow, you see?
So he married a Muslim, and their family, their side is Muslim.
Yeah.
Jojo Jau married a Christian whose name was Thomas Roberts.
Yeah.
And she had 4 children: Marianne Roberts, Catherine Roberts, William Roberts, and James Roberts. Marianne Roberts is the mother of Crispin Gray Johnson, the elder, who's the father of Crispin Gray Johnson and Nana Gray Johnson, former ministers and authors. William Roberts is our ancestor.
Okay.
He had 3 children, Melville Roberts, Thomas Roberts, and Elsie Roberts. Elsie Roberts married Mr. Monday and was the mother of Horace Monday,
Monday, yeah.
who was the former governor of Central Bank, and then the first High Commissioner to the UK.
Yeah.
Thomas Roberts is our ancestor. He's the father of my grandmother, Mary Ann Briggs.
Yeah.
So Mary Ann Briggs, she was Roberts originally. She's the sister of Nanette Roberts, who was the former matron of the hospital, the mother of Alex da Costa, my uncle, Chris and Peter. Mary Ann Roberts is the mother of Cynthia Briggs and Caroline Briggs. Cynthia Briggs is my mother.
It's your mother.
Yeah. My father's name is Efiok Okon, but he comes from a family in Nigeria that we don't have surnames. Okon is his grandfather's name. So when I was born, they gave me that name as a middle name, Okon, and then they gave me Briggs as the surname.
Wow.
So that's why I'm a Briggs. Everyone gets confused that, oh, your mom is Briggs and your dad, I'm Okon Briggs.
Okay,
but we use Briggs as the last name, so I just continued using
but he originated from Nigeria.
Yeah, so he originated
but again, so you were born to two parents who were Christians?
Yeah, both of my parents are Christian.
Both of your parents are Christian. So, but you know that you're Muslim. So, so how did it come about?
Yeah, so the Islam, it was interesting. So my grandmother, I mentioned earlier, my grandmother was the one that raised me. So she would always bring me back to the Gambia on holiday. And anytime I'm here, I'd always see mosques, I'd see people praying. I was, you know, seeing that Islam was a very big part of Gambian society. So it started to get me to question, well, if everyone here is Muslim and we're Gambian, why are we not Muslim? So then that led me to kind of do research and look into the history of everything. I'm a very big history geek. So I was looking into the history, and then I realized, you know, that Christianity came to us as Creoles, as Akus, through the slave trade, through colonization, and that Islam had had a presence in this region and in West Africa for over 1,000 years, whereas Christianity had come later. So then I started to compare the two religions between Christianity and Islam, and then I decided at a young age that I wanted to become Muslim.
At what age?
13.
At 13?
Yeah, 13.
And then what did you do after that?
So I connected with a sheikh in Senegal called Sheikh Hassan Cisse.
Imam Hassan Cisse?
Imam Hassan Cisse. He was the grandson of Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse.
Yes.
I used to call him, I used to ask him questions. He always used to make time for me. And then one day he said to me, I'm praying that you can become Muslim. I was in London at the time. He said, my younger brother, Sheikh Mahis, he says, come into London. I want you to go to him and he converts you to Islam.
Wow.
So that's what I ended up doing. I converted to Islam. Then they gave me the name Mustafa.
Yeah.
And then I continued. They have a niece there who has a dara, Astu Cisse. I started studying with her in the dara, learning Quran at the age of 14, 15. Anytime Sheikh Hassan Cisse's uncles would come, Sheikh Makki Niasse, the son of Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse, I used to spend time with them. Then I started visiting them in Medina Bay as well. If we come here for Christmas, I'll celebrate Christmas with my family. Then I'll go to Medina Bay and we would, you know, the settings there, studying, learning, growing until today. That was over 15 years ago.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
But that's excellent. Let's go now. This is a personal question. But did you always know you were going to be an author? Is this something you dreamed of or aspired towards?
So being an author, it's funny. I never dreamed of being an author or aspired to be an author. When I was younger, I liked reading books, but I never thought that a day would come that I would write my own book. I didn't even know if I was to write a book, what I would write it about. And even the idea of the book, it came about by chance. So I remember when I was younger, when I was about 18, Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse, he has a secretary called Ustaz Barham Job, who's a very well-respected Islamic scholar, and he had a conference in Paris. So I went to visit him in Paris, and I took a book to him, and I asked him to sign the book for me. And then he looked at me, and he said to me, I said, I'm not going to sign this book. I'm waiting for you to bring me your book.
MashaAllah.
And I was thinking, I've never thought of writing a book. But when I finished my master's degree, I studied international relations and Arabic as my bachelor's in Westminster University in London. And then I did my master's in translation with a specialization on Arabic and Islamic texts at School of Oriental African Studies at the University of London. And throughout the whole time, my focus was Islam and Islamic texts in West Africa, because I felt like that was an area in Islamic studies that's understudied. We have amazing scholars such as, you know, Alhaji Abdullah Niasse and his family, Alhaji Malik Sy, Sheikh Ahmadu Bamba, and all of the scholars in Timbuktu and in all of these areas who have written amazing books, amazing works in the Arabic language. But nobody really explores that side or their contribution to Islam. So I wanted to, through my studies, discover and uncover those. So because of that, a lot of the universities, when I finished my master's degree, they started to invite me to speak about these subjects because they didn't have other people who knew about Islam in Africa, etc. So I started giving lectures. My first lecture was at King's College in London. Then my second one was at Oxford University about this subject. And then I continued to Leeds and Manchester, different universities. And then I created a presentation called Beyond Bilal, Black History in Islam. When that started, I did a 20-university tour in the UK in October, 2018. Then after that, February was Black History Month in the USA. I was invited to the USA to do a tour there. I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I went to a few, there's 8 Ivy League universities. I lectured at 3 of them.
Wow.
6 of them. I did all of that, and everywhere I went, people were asking me, where can we have this information? Have you written it as a book? Can you compile it into a book? So once 2, 3, 4, 5 people asked me for a book, then I said, okay, I have to turn it into a book. So that's how I started to gather all of the information that I was presenting in the lectures and the presentations and gather it into a book form. And then I was able to publish it this year in February.
Oh, mashallah.
Yeah,
so please give an overview of Beyond Bilal. That's your book and its development as a book author. Or what was it like doing research for the book? You know, going through this history, and also how did this feel at this time?
Yeah. So the book is interesting because I feel as though, and I mentioned this in the introduction to the book, the foreword, that I feel like the research for the book was a reflection of my own personal journey as a West African Muslim trying to uncover the Islamic heritage where I come from. So, and seeing my place as a black Muslim within Islam. So a lot of the information, I had to do final research in terms of referencing and everything, but it's all information that I had gathered over years as being a black Muslim that was doing research and studying traditionally. After I finished my secular studies in the UK, I transferred to Egypt, Cairo, where I'm currently based, and I'm doing another degree in Islamic studies at Al-Azhar University, which is one of the oldest universities in the world. It's over 1,000 years old. And throughout that whole time, I feel like I've been doing the research. But the book is divided into 5 chapters, 5 sections. The first section discusses black history in the Quran. So I speak about prophets who were described as being black, either by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself or by the scholars, the Quranic scholars who do tafsir, etc. And I discuss the different theories and the different evidences for major prophets in the Quran, like Adam, like Moses, Musa, like Jesus, Isa, being black, because they were described as such by the Prophet ﷺ or by the scholars. And then the second chapter deals with the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, who were black, either black Arabs or black Africans. For the majority of us, if we grow up and we watch movies like The Message, we see or we imagine the time of the Prophet ﷺ to be, there was only one black Sahaba, Bilal, who coincidentally was played by a Gambian. Johnny Seka was the actor. But when you research and you go into the history and you read the books in Arabic and you see the different biographies of all the companions, you can see that there are hundreds of companions who played major roles in Islam who were black Africans or black Arabs. People such as Baraka, the person who raised the Prophet ﷺ. She was an Ethiopian woman. And then we have some of the earliest Sahaba who memorized the Quran. Some of the earliest Sahaba who used to teach, the Sahaba that used to lead armies into battle for the Prophet, his generals, a lot of them were black. And we have earlier scholars in Islam such as Jalaluddin Suyuti and Ibn Jawzi, who when they started to see racism in the Arab world, they compiled the biographies of these black companions to show people that, you know, black people, we shouldn't discriminate against them within the religion because they've been here from the very beginning contributing. Even if we look at the history of the Prophet ﷺ, before Medina, his city, was established, he sent his daughter and a group of his companions to seek refuge in Africa when they were being oppressed in Mecca. In the 5th year of his mission, he sent a group of them to Ethiopia, and they were received by the Emperor of Ethiopia. And so the first place where Islam was freely practiced was here in Africa. And Islam, its first home was in Africa. And even in Mecca, when we think about Mecca, we never think about the fact that the founderess of the city of Mecca was a black African woman.
Really?
It was Hajara, the wife of Sayyidina Ibrahim. Because she was a Nubian from Egypt, south of Egypt and Sudan, that area. And even the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there's in the Seerah of Ibn Ishaq, one of the earliest books of the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's narrated through Ibn Hisham that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when Egypt is open up for you and you go there, he said, you'll meet people there with black skin and curly hair. He says, treat them well because they are our relatives through marriage and our relatives through ancestry, because they traced their ancestry to Hajara, who was the wife of Abraham. She was Nubian. And then the Prophet ﷺ also married a woman from them, Maria Qibtiyah, who gave birth to his last son, Ibrahim. So he said, there are in-laws and there are ancestors, these black Africans. So I speak about that in the second chapter. Then in the third chapter, I discuss the history of Islam in West Africa. I speak about the ancient empires that we had here, the Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, Songhai. These are empires that were over 1,000 years old. The Ghana Empire and Takurur in northern Senegal, which now we know as Futa Toro. Those were the places where Islam first entered here over 1,000 years ago. So the Ghana Empire, there's a book written by a historian from Mali in the 16th century, 15th, 16th century. It was called Tarikh al-Fattash, the history of West Africa. And he mentioned in that book that the Ghana Empire, which modern-day Ghana was named after, it was in Mali, the Ghana Empire originally, Mali and Mauritania, the Soninke people, Sarahule people established it. That they had 20 kings before the advent of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and 20 kings after the Prophet ﷺ. So that means there, if the Prophet ﷺ was around 500, the year 570, that means the empire existed hundreds of years before that, and it continued hundreds of years after that. They were the first people in West Africa to embrace Islam alongside the Fulani people in Futa Toro. And then from there, Islam started to spread through them throughout West Africa. So I detail the history of how Islam entered. The fact that Islam was never forced upon West Africans, which is the Orientalist narrative. If we look at a lot of Western scholarship, especially in the early days of colonization, they would say it was the Almoravids from Morocco who tried to take over the Ghana Empire in the 12th century, and they forced people to convert to Islam, when that wasn't the case, because we have earlier Arabic sources from the 11th and 10th century detailing the fact that Ghana, which was a West African empire, the king wasn't Muslim, he was still practicing traditional African religions, but in his capital city there were already 12 mosques that were built by Africans. So when we look at these earlier sources, before the Almoravid invasion of Mali, we see that they had 12 mosques in the capital city. The king wasn't Muslim, but his interpreter was Muslim. The person in charge of everything to do with the economy was Muslim. His ministers were Muslim, and a lot of the prominent people in his government were Muslims. So Muslims and non-Muslims were living side to side. So the spirit of tolerance that we still see today in West Africa, where Muslims are tolerating other religions and living side by side with them and even under their authority, that's always how Islam has been practiced in West Africa. And no Arabs had ever ruled West Africa or invaded West Africa or forced Africans to become Muslims. And all of the scholars had discussed this at length, and I bring those discussions in the book when I talk about a lot of the West African empires that have existed over the past 1,000 years that have all been, Muslim empires. And then the fourth chapter, I speak about the spread of Islam in America, in the Americas. And that came through a lecture that I was doing in England to teach them about the history of Islam in America. And it's interesting because the first people to arrive in America that practiced Islam were West African Muslims from places like Ghana, from Sierra Leone, from Guinea, from Senegal, from Gambia, from Nigeria. There was even a professor in Harvard University called Leo Weiner in 1920 who wrote a book called Africa and the Discovery of the Americas. And in that book, he looked at archaeological evidence to say that the ancient Mali Empire had sent out people who arrived in America before Columbus. He was attacked heavily in America for this, but he was a Harvard University professor and he put this proposal forward. And if we look at Mansa Musa, when he was interviewed in Cairo on his way to Hajj, he was a 13th century emperor of the Mali Empire. He was explaining to them that the reason why he became the king was because his elder brother Mansa Abu Bakr had traveled across the Atlantic Ocean with 2,000 boats full of people and never returned. So the kingdom was entrusted to him, and then he became the king. So then the question is, those 2,000 boats that departed from the Mali Empire, probably through Guinea or through Gambia, did they arrive on the other side? Because if they did, that means the first Muslims to arrive in the Americas were West African Muslims. And then we know the history of the transatlantic slave trade as well. The majority, I would say nearly half, of the people taken from West Africa to the Americas were Muslims, because they came from our area. We know the story of Kunta Kinte.
Yes,
If he's from Jufure here, he's Muslim. And there were many others like them, so I highlight their stories. Their stories of people who, you know, they were scholars, religious scholars who were taken to the Americas, people who went on to become businessmen. One of the first African-American property owners and investors in the bank, his name was Muhammad Yaro. He was a Fulani from West Africa, and he practiced Islam until he passed away. And many of those kind of figures, so I talk about them all in chapter 4.
Chapter 4. But let's talk about now chapter 5. You have a subsection titled The Female Saints and Scholars of Africa. Tell us a little more of what role you feel black women have played in this unfolding historical legacy of black excellence, specifically within the tradition of Islam.
Yeah, definitely. So with chapter 5, I decided to focus specifically on the female legends and the female characters that we have in Islamic history, because I feel as though a lot of the time women are usually excluded in the discussion in traditional society, and unfortunately within Islamic society as well. And women have always been there from the beginning, side by side with men, contributing and establishing the religion. If we have the Quran today, it's because of a woman. And if we have a hadith and the sunnah today as well, the example of the Prophet ﷺ, it's because of a woman. Because when the Quran was first compiled in the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, the first Khalif of the Prophet, it was entrusted to Sayyidina Omar. He was the one that completed it. And it's his daughter Hafsa, who was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ, that had the first physical copy of the Quran, and she kept it. And then it's from her copy, Sayyidina Uthman made the copies that we have today. So all of the Quran can be traced back to Hafsa's copy of the Quran. Then with the Sunnah, the Hadith, everyone knows it's the Quran and then the Hadith. Over 2,000 of the Hadith, and that's a lot of the Hadith. And what we know about the life of the Prophet ﷺ comes to us through his wife Aisha. Many of the Hadith are narrated through her, and she was one of the most respected companions of the Prophet, and one that the other companions used to defer to for jurisprudence, for law, for anything that they wanted to know about the religion, to the point that it said you can take half of Islam from Aisha. So that means women have always been there from the beginning, side by side. And especially here in West Africa, that tradition is still very strong. If we look at the Sokoto Caliphate, which ruled northern Nigeria about 200 years ago, it was established by a scholar called Usman Dan Fodio. His daughters were all scholars. And his daughters wrote books, they used to teach, they used to have organizations. And their organizations weren't just educational organizations, but they were organizations that focused on societal development, because they would open schools, they would also raise funds for women to open businesses. So all of the development projects that we see happening in Africa and microfinance schemes, it was happening 200 years ago, led by Muslim female scholars who they didn't leave Islam or dilute their Islam in order to develop, but they used Islam as a tool for development. Economic development, societal development, educational development. The same thing in Senegal. If we think about the scholars that we have in Senegal, such as Serigne Touba, Sheikh Ahmed Bamba, Sheikh Ibrahim Niass, all of them, they made their daughters scholars. Their daughters had memorized the Quran, their daughters became community leaders. Their daughters, if we look at, for example, Serigne Touba, his daughter, Sohna May, was the person that used to organize everything to do with celebrating Laylatul Qadr, the end of Ramadan, in Touba. He also had another daughter, Sohna Musli and Sohna Momi. They were the ones, one of them had a factory that used to produce chere. She was one of the biggest agropreneurs in Senegal. And to the point that she was the one that supplied the Senegalese army with their chere. She supplied all of the pilgrims to Mecca with their chere. When there was the ceremony of independence, she also had a textile factory. So Senghor, all of the tablecloths and everything, decorations for the ceremony of the independence in Senegal, he ordered from her factory. And she was the first woman to receive a national award from President Senghor at that time. So not only were they scholars in their mosques building daras, but they were agripreneurs, they were entrepreneurs, they were businesswomen, they were society leaders. Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse, same thing. Recently, one of his daughters, Sayyidah Khairi Niasse, she lives in Niger. She has an NGO there that has over 200,000 members, that they build schools, they build hospitals, they build clinics, they provide finance schemes for women, female entrepreneurs. And because of that, she was recognized by Tufts University in Boston and given the Global Humanitarian Citizen Award. Sheikha Mariam Niasse, one of Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse's daughters as well, she's famous for having a dara in Dakar, a Quranic school that became a Franco-Arab school. So they would study French and Arabic, memorize the Quran, and over 100,000 children had studied at her school. And she was so dedicated to education. Today in Harvard University, the head of everything to do with Islamic studies and African American studies is her son, Professor Usman Khan.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, so all of those women, we could see that their religion and their tradition didn't stop them from achieving what they needed to achieve in the world. And they were focused on their religion, but they were also focused on their worldly aspect and everything to do with education, entrepreneurship, societal development. They played an active role. And I think that is unique to West Africa, because you hardly hear of this anywhere else. Female scholars, female sheikhs, female community leaders who do these amazing things in their societies. And so people like that are people that we should know about, we should talk about, and we should discover their stories, and they can serve as role models for us, the younger generation. Because if they were able to achieve what they achieved, then we could achieve similar things.
Excellent. Actually, on that note, really, I mean, I would like to encourage, our generation now to learn from these. That yes, I mean, they came from households that were very Islamic, but then their worldly matters. Like the basic thing about the economy, like feeding yourself. Like today, we know that, look, Islam has expanded everywhere. But let's also consider the fact that we have worldly issues, like we need to feed ourselves. The economy needs to move. So it will be a good point to embrace also economic activities.
Yeah, definitely.
A good way will be to combine, yes, all these madrasas that we have with things like skills, acquiring skills.
Definitely.
Because you need to work. So maybe people like yourselves who are so well established in Islamic studies and also preaching, that this needs to be encouraged, that we need to embrace worldly matters, basic things like running our economy, while studying and being Islamic doesn't stop us from also working and feeding ourselves and making a living.
Definitely. And I feel as though the reason why people are disconnected from that aspect is because they don't study Islam well enough, because it's all there in the Quran and in the Sunnah.
Excellent.
And even as you mentioned with the skills, recently I was in Medina Bay in Senegal, and I was speaking to a daughter of Sheikh Ibrahim Niasse called Ndeye Aida Niasse. And she has a Quranic school for girls. But with that Quranic school, she's also included skills and trading and teaching them a trade. She said she doesn't want people to just come and study the Quran and go and not be a benefit to their society. But as they're studying the Quran, they also learn a trade, they also learn a craft, so that they can work and contribute to their society.
Thank you very much. So listeners, this brings us to the end of this episode, but we cannot stop here. We will definitely come on to a second episode, and so join us next week on this. Thank you.
Welcome to the TAF HUB. This is a brand new show brought to you by TAF Africa Global to educate you on real estate business and all the information you need to know about real estate.
After 45 years of construction and real estate development in 8 African countries, it is time to share my experience, and it can only be done in the TAF HUB. We will be inviting experts who will give you facts and the right regulations on real estate development.
Join us every week on our social media platforms for an exciting show.
You can also watch us on JRTS TV every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.